Hey, Thad Brown back with you here on the Endgame. Sorry about that. Had a little technical difficulty there. But we are good to go now. Back with you here on a Thursday afternoon. And where we left off was talking, or at least just beginning the discussion about Bills and Texans for tonight. And like I said, the number one story with any Texans game is about that defense. They are as good as advertised. It starts with the defensive ends. Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson are ridiculous. They have 17 sacks combined. Each guy on their own is in the top 10 when it comes to sack production so far this year. So dealing with these two guys and the pressure and the terror, frankly, they cause every single snap is job number one when it comes to going against this defense. Now, the thing is with Houston is that beyond Hunter and Anderson, the Texans defense only has 25 sacks as a team. So you've got 17 sacks by two guys. Each one of these guys individually have at least 8 sacks. The whole team beyond that only has 8 more. So if you can somehow deal with Hunter and Anderson, you can have a little more success against the Texans than most teams do. And the Bills have 2 pretty good tackles, Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown. Brown right now has put himself in a group of maybe 2 or 3 or 4. He is a top 5 right tackle in the NFL. Without question, without discussion. Everything is good about what Spencer Brown is doing right now. Run blocking, pass blocking. One of the best reps he had in this game against Tampa Bay was one where he lost. He got beat inside. I don't remember who the pass rusher was. It doesn't matter. Every offensive lineman from time to time is going to lose a rep, is going to just be on the wrong side of a move, overset, whatever it is. Spencer Brown in this game lost a rep and was able to recover and still make sure that the pass rusher, they got some pressure, but didn't really cause Josh Allen a problem. That's where Spencer Brown is right now. Even his losses are good. Now, Deion Dawkins is probably not where he was maybe last year or a year ago, to where he is one of the elite left tackles in the game. He's still pretty good, but his play this year has probably sagged a little bit, which is not the worst thing in the world. He was playing at a high enough level to where some regression still leaves him in a spot where he's playing okay. But of the 2 tackles, Spencer Brown right now I think is the better one. Regardless, the Bills have 2 guys who they can reasonably feel like they can put them on an island at least some of the time with Anderson and with Hunter and be okay. You don't have to worry about chipping both sides, helping both sides, leaving running backs and tight ends in both sides all day long. You can leave Brown and Dawkins there. Now, the DNs, the guys that Houston has, are going to win a few. They're just that good. It's just going to happen. But if the Bills' tackles can be enough to keep those guys from ruining the game for Buffalo offensively, then I think there's a chance the Bills can do some things against this Texans defense, at least more things than other teams do. But don't get me wrong. Hunter and Anderson are absolutely the best combo in the league. Individually, they're probably not the best. Obviously, Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, Micah Parsons, those are probably the best edge rushers in the game. But Hunter and Anderson are like a third of a notch below those guys. They're really, really good. Beyond that, though, the Texans aren't done. They still have Darryl Stingley in the secondary. They're going to be without Jalen Petrie, who's kind of their safety nickel combo. He's the guy who roams around in the middle of the secondary making all kinds of plays. Maybe sort of Derwin James-ish, not quite. So the Texans still have a pretty solid group behind those 2 nasty edge rushers up front. There is, however, a weakness that is maybe a little bit surprising. The Texans are only 28th when it comes to red zone defense. So when teams get inside the 20, they convert those possessions into touchdowns against Houston more than just about everybody else in the league. To be honest, another team that's surprisingly down low in this category is New England, despite they're not a Houston defense, but they're a pretty good defense. So if you're the Bills and you can get the ball to the 20, you're in pretty good shape because Buffalo's red zone offense is 5th in the league. And when you have Josh Allen, who you can pretty much bowl him in from almost anywhere inside the 10-yard line, it makes scoring touchdowns pretty easy once you get into the red zone. So if the Bills can get to the 20, then a game where it's certainly advantage Houston when Buffalo has the ball becomes advantage Buffalo. The problem is getting to the 20 because, as you might expect, how can Houston's defense be so good if they're so bad in the red zone? Well, they must not let many teams get to the red zone, and that's the case. The Texans have only allowed 23 red zone opportunities all year long. That's 2.3 a game. So think about that. The average game for Houston, the normal, regular, everyday game for the Texans is the other team gets to the 20-yard line twice, and that's it. I think the Bills will get there more than that. If the Bills only get to the 22 times tonight and don't have multiple 30-plus yard touchdowns, they're going to lose. So I think Buffalo gets into the red zone more than twice tonight. And if they can convert those possessions, that again is another opportunity for the Bills offense to be successful. So although Houston's defense is going to be a legit test, and they are, even at home, especially at home probably, as good as you have heard about, there are some spots where it feels like the Bills offense can, in theory at least, have more success than the average team. The other thing too is Houston's run defense isn't the best part of its defense, which isn't knocking the run defense that much. The pass defense is so good. They're number 2 in yards per attempt allowed. They're number 1 in EPA per throw allowed. The pass defense for Houston is just, other than maybe Denver, Philly, Houston are the top 3 in terms of pass defense in the NFL. And then there's probably a big drop to the next group. And you can make an argument that Houston is third of those 3. They're still really, really good. So that will be a big part of what Buffalo is trying to do tonight, is figuring out something to do through the air. And this is with a receiving group that may not have Keon Coleman. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I do think the Bills have an opportunity to run the ball a little bit more. At least the underlying numbers say that Houston's that Houston's rush defense is not quite as good as the pass defense, which again is not a knock because the pass defense is unbelievable. But the run defense is only 10th in EPA per carry allowed, for what that's worth. So there might be a little bit of a ray of light there. So you look over this matchup when the Bills have the ball. They have the tackles, we think, to handle the 2 nasty edge rushers. The Texans have an issue when it comes to red zone defense. So if the Bills can get to the red zone, they would have the advantage. And what the Bills do better offensively is the thing Houston does ever so slightly worse. So I think all those little small opportunities, advantages, whatever you want to call them, can add up to a situation in this game for the Bills where they have a reasonable opportunity to move the ball more than a lot of teams do against the Texans. Texans aren't unbeatable. Jacksonville put 29 on them. So you can score in this defense for sure. Let me see. I did not study if they have a really good defensive performance against a good offense, because playing in that AFC South, you don't see a lot of great offenses. They held Tampa to 20 back week 2 when Tampa was a heck of a lot healthier. They held the Rams to 14 week 1. That was week 1 though. A lot of teams are different. They gave up 27 to Seattle and 29 to Jacksonville. So in terms of games where the Texans have allowed more than 20 points, it's just Seattle week 7 in Seattle. And then the Jacksonville game, but even Jacksonville getting up 29, there was a punt return touchdown in there. So it's really only 23, 22. Let's see the Seattle game quick here before I move on to the other side of the ball. Offensive touchdown, field goal, offensive touchdown. So no defensive points. So Seattle right now is the team with the most points against the Houston defense, scoring 27, and they scored their 27 and 3/4. They did not score in the 4th quarter. I remember watching that game on Monday night, and that one is where I kind of really started to respect what Houston's doing on defense. Not that I didn't before, but Seattle was in charge of that game the whole second half. You knew who was winning because the Houston offense just could do absolutely nothing against what's a pretty good defense in Seattle. And yet the Texans defense kept turning the ball over, kept giving their offense chances, kept them remotely in the game. So this defense will not stop coming after you and will not stop coming after the Bills tonight either. Let's go to the offensive side of the ball, or at least when Houston has the ball offensively. They're not very good, as I'm sure you've heard. In fact, they're generally pretty bad, but they're not terribly bad. They're 21st, 22nd, 23rd in most categories. So they're not the worst team. They're not one of the bottom 5. They're not one of the bottom quarter. They do move the ball okay. Even with Davis Mills, they scored 30 against Jacksonville in that crazy comeback a couple weeks ago. So they're not good. They're not intimidating. Other than Nico Collins, the receiver you see on your screen right now, there's not really a piece in this offense that's going to worry anybody in a Bills uniform or any other defense they face tonight. But they're not the worst ever. The thing about the Texans defense that the Bills want to, or Texans offense that the Bills want to exploit or should want to exploit tonight, they are dead last in rushing success rate. So the Bills cannot let Nick Chubb and Woody Marks suddenly become a good tandem or even one guy become functional. You got to try and keep that rush offense on the ground, keep them unsuccessful, keep them frustrated with what they've been doing all year, and their offensive line is not very good. That, to me, is almost goal number one for the Bills. Do not let this Texans run offense figure anything out. Davis Mills is not a worry either. I do think he's one of the better backup quarterback options in the league. Not good even for that, but there are worse backup quarterback options for sure than what Davis Mills can do. But if the Bills can make Houston one-dimensional, make Davis Mills beat you. The Bills defense isn't great, but we've seen when they get in, pin their ears back, and rush the passer situations like they did in the second half against the Chiefs and against the Panthers for virtually the entire game, they can be very, very nasty. So if you take Houston's run game away in this one, make Davis Mills become the guy who has to beat you, I think the defense can have some success. So I'm pretty comfortable taking the Bills in this game. It's Thursday night. Weird stuff happens on Thursday night. And you think about the last two times the Bills were in Houston. Had that game last year where Josh Allen completes 9 throws and that's it. And they lose on a last second 58-yard field goal, whatever it was. And then the time before that Buffalo was in Houston was the wild card playoff game where the Bills are ahead at halftime. They get that weird kickoff coming out of the halftime break. They blow the lead in the second half. Josh Allen has to drive to a field goal to force overtime, and then they lose in overtime. So the Bills have been on the short end of weird stuff in Houston. And it's Thursday night, so weird stuff happens on Thursday night. So obviously don't discount this as being a game that could get a little on tilt. But I do think the Bills should be the team that comes out with a victory tonight. Now, how the Bills win will be of great interest to many Bills fans because Keon Coleman is still very much a hot button story for this team. It has not been something that has gotten off of the keyboards and the thoughts of Bills Mafia this week in terms of where Keon Coleman is, not only for this week, but with his future. So we don't know if he's going to play. I think the general thought is, I don't know what the general thought. I think there's a question about whether he's going to play. If he doesn't play, what's the explanation? I think, first of all, it's easy to say, well, the Bills took Keon out. They put a whole bunch of new guys in, Mecole Hardman, Gabe Davis, Terrell Shavers had a bigger role, and they scored 44 points against Tampa. And no matter what you think of how those 44 points came to be, that's what happened. That's what the scoreboard said at the end of the game. So why go away from that for the next game, especially when the next game is only 5 days later, 4 days later, whatever it is? Stay with the hot group. No matter what you might think your former 33rd overall pick could offer in theory. Stay with the same guys that got you those 44 points a week ago. I don't think this is necessarily about any sort of major shift in terms of what the Bills think of Keon Coleman going forward. This is not Keon Coleman is never coming back. And I know this has kind of been the thought or the theory from a lot of Bills Mafia this week that Keon Coleman might never play again, that his future in Buffalo, his career in Buffalo is over. And that's what this is saying, that Keon not playing, if he doesn't play in this game tonight, that he is done with the Bills, which I don't buy even for a second. Number one, the Bills invested a very high second round pick. This is not picking in the 50s. This is not picking in the 60s. This is pick 33. That is still a large amount, a large significant asset you have invested in this player. Brandon Beane said 2-3 weeks ago after the trade deadline that Keon Coleman is the guy the Bills need to get where they're going. So this franchise, as recently as 15 or 20 days ago, was full-throatedly behind Keon Coleman. There was no question. There was no wavering. Now, there's no doubt that Keon Coleman has offered plenty of reasons in the last couple weeks to give the Bills pause about their support of him. and his future. Going to a meeting late is certainly a part of it, but at this point, I don't think that Keon Coleman getting benched against the Bucks is just about being late to one meeting. There's a larger problem here, and being late to the meeting is the broken taillight on the car that the cop pulls you over for. He's not concerned about the broken taillight. He's pulling you over to see what else is going on because there might be a larger problem. The broken taillight is the excuse to write the ticket. Going late to the meeting for Keon is the excuse to bench him. If only being late to a meeting was the problem, the Bills could address that. You could change the time of the meetings. That's a simple thing to fix. So if Keon Coleman is getting benched, this is not about missing one or two meetings. There is a larger problem about his attitude. I have to think. And I'm not sure how much the Bills felt like he has been contrite and has changed his ways since then. He did come out and speak to the media after the game, and I gave him kudos for that. That he stood there, he took questions, was polite, answered everything. But I don't know if anything beyond that has happened. There's been no indication that anything beyond that has happened that indicates Keon Coleman is a changed player or person. Doesn't mean he's not learning. There were a couple players, Deion Dawkins in particular, who said they talked with Keon, and at least Deion felt like he got what he wanted, or he heard what he wanted to hear out of Keon Coleman. So just because Keon Coleman speaks to the media one time doesn't mean things are changed, and doesn't mean the Bills are satisfied with where he's at. Now, does that mean that Keon Coleman is not ever going to come back? I don't think that what happens in this one game is an indication of that. Number one, the Bills offense, I think, still has to continue to play well. If the Bills put 30 on Houston tonight and then go to Pittsburgh next week and put 30 on them and then hammer the Bengals' terrible defense the week after that, well, then, yeah, I wouldn't bring Keon Coleman back either because you clearly have something that's working. So as long as this group continues to produce, why mess with it? Because as much as there's an upside for Keon Coleman, he has yet to even come close to realizing it, so there's no need to force that back in there. I mean, if you want to make the argument that the reason the Bills were good is because Keon Coleman was gone against the Bucks, well, then don't you also have to argue that Dalton Kincaid missed the game? So therefore, maybe Dalton Kincaid not being a part of it is something the Bills should consider, which obviously they will not because Dalton Kincaid's been productive. Keon Coleman has not been productive. So whenever Dalton Kincaid comes back, he's going to go back into the offense, and the Bills are going to hope he can augment what's working, whereas you don't know Keon Coleman can do that. So regardless, a part of what happens with Keon Coleman's future is about what this group does while he's on the bench. If they keep playing well, you don't rock the boat. But can this group keep playing well? Well, I have reasonable doubts about whether Josh Palmer, Gabe Davis, and Terrell Shavers can be the outside receiving group for a championship team. The thing with those three guys, no matter what you want to say positive about all three, and all three do bring good things to the table when it comes to being a receiver as a starter or a major contributor for the Bills. But there is no ceiling with those guys. Josh Palmer's been in this league 4 years. Injuries have been a part of his story. Injuries have been a part of his story here in Buffalo this year as well. Josh Palmer, after week 1, doesn't have more than 2 catches in a single game. It doesn't mean he can't be more productive. It doesn't mean he's not getting open. He was open a lot against Tampa Bay, but he still only got the ball 2 times. So Josh Palmer, I don't think it's reasonable to expect him to suddenly blossom into this super productive receiver when he's a guy that's only had 2 catches in every single game since the ridiculous comeback game against Baltimore. Gabe Davis, we know exactly what he is. He spent 4 years in Buffalo. We saw what he can provide. There's certainly the lightning bolt 153 touchdown game in there. He can be a guy that can occasionally make the big play. Josh Allen has a rapport with him. There's a trust level there. But is he going to be more than that ever? No, we know exactly what he's going to be. And there's a lot about that, like I said, that's good. He's a heck of a blocker to begin with. And he's got more trust with the current quarterback than Keon Coleman does. But is Gabe Davis suddenly going to blossom into an upper tier, even number 2 receiver? No, we know what he is. And I love what Terrell Shavers has done. That dude works his tail off and has been doing it for 2 or 3 years now. He has fought and clawed his way into the 53 roster, and now into a part of the regular rotation, whether it be special teams, reserve receiver, whatever it is. And yeah, when you go 4 for 90, you have earned an opportunity to be on the field more and be more of a participant in the passing game. But this is not a guy that's suddenly bringing a ridiculous athletic skill set to the table. There's a reason why he had to scratch and claw his way onto the roster. And even this last game, where he went 4 for 90, you had a 42-yard touchdown that was a broken play. You had a 20-yard out route at the end of the first half where the Bills had solved the coverage. And then you had a 20-yard over-the-middle dig where, again, the Bills had solved the coverage. All three of those plays are plays that any functional receiver would have made. I'm fairly confident that Keon Coleman makes all three of those catches had he run the same route that Shavers run there. That's not a knock on Shavers. Shavers did his job. Shavers belongs in the NFL and belongs on the field on a regular basis. But is he going to suddenly develop a ceiling that's going to change fortunes in January? I think it's very reasonably skeptical of that. So you can go Palmer, Davis, Shavers the rest of the year. But it's hard for me to imagine them being anything better than what they were against Tampa. And obviously, you get that Tampa game again, they scored 44. That's just fine. There's a lot to ask to expect to get that from these three players as the ones dragging your offense on the outside. And obviously, the guy dragging the offense in all cases is number 17. But if you're going to rely on this group, I don't see where there's such a big upside that they're going to wildly change the fortunes or even significantly change the fortunes of the Bills passing offense. I could be wrong, and we'll find out more tonight. But if those three guys are who you're going to rely on to keep Keon Coleman on the bench, then you need those three guys to play at the level or close to it that they were at in the Tampa game for the rest of the year. Because I would think if you're the Bills, when you at least theoretically have the belief that you have said you have in Keon Coleman, and have supported him the way you have, and again, with what you invested in him, the moment there is a crack or a waiver or a question with one of those three guys, you put Keon Coleman back in the game. And keep in mind, those are the only three guys that matter. There are a number of people who are looking at this game tonight and thinking, well, McCole Hardman's not playing and Curtis Samuel's not playing. Why wouldn't Keon Coleman be in there? Keon Coleman doesn't replace any of those guys. They all play receiver, but they do wildly different jobs. McCole Hardman is primarily a return man. That's why Brandon Cotterington's back on the team. Keon Coleman's not going in for McCole Hardman. What Hardman contributes to this team, especially for a guy who just got here a week ago, is not so expansive that you need a receiver with Keon Coleman's alleged skill set to come in. So that's not a one-for-one. That's not a change. That McCole Hardman not playing has no impact on Keon Coleman. Curtis Samuel has a little more impact because he can, in theory, play some outside, but he's mostly a slot receiver. And as we've talked about before, he and Elijah Moore are virtually interchangeable when it comes to this offense. So as long as one of those two guys is healthy, you're going to be fine. Now, Khalil Shakir has not practiced all week. His wife just gave birth. Congrats to them. Very excited. Shakir is going to be an awesome dad. Just a good dude. If Shakir doesn't play tonight and Curtis Samuel doesn't play, well, then I'm a little surprised if Keon Coleman doesn't come out on the field because the Bills don't have anybody else. You'd roll out there with the three outside guys I talk about and Elijah Moore, and that'd be it. But as long as Shakir plays and he mans the slot, and you've got Elijah Moore, who can also be the backup in the slot, plus Davis and Palmer and Shavers, you're fine at receiver. And you don't need to put Keon Coleman in because Samuel or Hardman are out, or Kincaid for that matter. Those are not one-to-one changes. Those three guys being hurt and Coleman not being in is irrelevant. They're not related. It's about Palmer and Davis and Shavers. And again, if those guys keep playing at the level they played against Tampa, Keon Coleman's going to have to find his way to get comfortable wearing a baseball cap on Sundays. But I'd be surprised if that happened, and I'd be surprised with the way the Bills have tried to support Keon Coleman if this is the end for Keon Coleman in a Bills uniform. They spent 3 full years trying to make Kyer Elam work. They spent 3 full years trying to make Cody Ford work. They will give Keon Coleman more than a season and a half, as long as he's reasonably handling his business off the field. Because like I said, this benching that happened last week is not about one missed meeting. It can't be. And if Keon Coleman's wider problems don't change, well, then Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, I don't think are guys who are going to tolerate that for very long. But if he does show any inkling of growth, remember, We came into this year with rave reviews about Keon Coleman, how responsible he was, how much he had changed, how much he was doing things the right way. So either the Bills were bald-faced lying about what Keon Coleman did in the summer, or they saw growth and now we've seen a step back. And one step back after a year plus of unwavering support is not going to put Keon Coleman on the outs with the Bills forever. He will get another chance. Unless Shavers and Davis and Palmer are so good that they Wally Pip him out of the way, or they Lou Gehrig him out of the way and make him a guy who can't play anymore. All right, let's take a break. When we come back here, I want to get into maybe a little more of the Bills, but also want to talk about a high school topic that always drives me nuts this time of year. Why we focus on the wrong things with high school sports was on display again over the weekend. I'll explain that next. My name is Thad Brown. This is the Endgame. Thanks very much for watching. This is Rochester First, but the cool kids, they all call it Rock One. We're back after. Thad Brown back here with you on the Endgame here on a Thursday. Went out to lunch with the wife this afternoon, kind of our Thursday tradition now, that we're empty nesters. I got one daughter, she's in college. I must say the empty nest life, a little more exciting than expected. It's been fun to just kind of go out whenever we want. But anyway, went out to lunch today and had too many sodas. And been discovering that I might need to control the soda consumption at lunchtime to make everything flow a little better here on the show. But made it back in time for the break to end, so nobody at home knew any of the better, except that I explained to you exactly what's going on. All right. Over the weekend, the New York State Soccer State Championships were held, both for boys and girls. And there were a number of Section 5 teams who attended. None of them won. Well, hold on. One of them did win, sorta. See, Fillmore and Hamilton played one heck of a Class D state championship over the weekend. A 4-4 soccer game. Fillmore got up 3-1 early in the second half. Hamilton came roaring back 3 goals in a row, took a 4-3 lead late, and then Fillmore got a goal with a couple minutes to go, I think less than 2 minutes to go, to tie the game and force overtime. What happened after that is why I'm talking about this game. So in overtime, neither team scored. The game 4-4 following overtime. In every other round of high school soccer playoffs, again, boys and girls, there's a penalty shootout to see who moves on. But not in the state championship. See, in the state championship, they end those games in a tie after overtime. Because, and this is what I was told years ago when I covered a couple of these in person, that the state committee doesn't feel like penalty kicks is an appropriate way to finish a state championship. And I can understand that to a degree. You play a game of soccer, penalty kicks is like a free throw shootout or a field goal kicking contest. It's a part of the game, but it's not a large part of the game. So you would like a championship decided by traditional play on the field. So I get the idea of not wanting to go to PKs to decide a state championship. But to be fair, the World Cup decides their championships with penalty kicks. Remember Brandy Chastain? That great moment that inspired women's soccer players and girls who wanted to play soccer everywhere? That's a penalty kick shootout to decide a championship. The Champions League decides their final with a championship. It's happened, or with penalty kicks. It's happened 10 times. If the Champions League and the World Cup think it's okay for penalty kicks to decide a championship, then I'm pretty sure New York State high school soccer can follow suit. But that's not what they've elected to do. So Fillmore and Hamilton, at the end of their overtime, ended a tie. It's co-champions. So remember, this is what New York State soccer thinks is the better choice. Well, let me show you what happened as that game ended in a tie. Here's the end of it right here. These are the final seconds. The broadcaster give him credit who's calling this game for NFHS. Appreciate those guys for supplying the video. Look how excited he is. He's trying to play it up. But look at the kids in the field. Do you see kids acting like they just won a championship? You can say co-championship all you want. I don't see anyone there acting like they won a championship. Now, look, here's the trophy ceremony, right? This is when Fillmore is going to receive their championship trophy. There's a little arms raised. Now, this is Hamilton getting their trophy. Funny thing is, when you do co-champions, because you're not prepared for that, they actually have a champion's plaque and a runner-up plaque. They gave Fillmore the runner-up plaque, and they gave Hamilton the champion plaque. Do you see anyone there acting like they've won a championship? Anyone there look like they're super excited? That they feel like that what has happened there is a good thing? Something that's benefiting anyone? You don't. You see two teams that ended in a tie and don't really know how to handle it. And this is why I have a problem with this. High school sports should be about learning. How many times have we heard, even with NCAA Division I sports, where athletes at the highest level are getting paid millions of dollars now, coaches and administrators pounding it into our head that these are not athletes first, they are student athletes. Well, at the high school level, that's 100% even more true. These are student athletes, right? So the idea of high school sports is to teach kids, correct? You want kids to learn things. There are so many good things that kids get from playing a sport. They learn how to communicate. They learn how to work as a team. They learn how to take guidance from a coach. They learn how to manage a schedule. They learn how to work hard. And they learn how to perform under pressure. These are all vital skills that all of us in the world who have played sports at that level have benefited from. But one of the best things that I've always thought about high school sports, especially at the varsity level, is that you can take a kid who's about to be sent off to college to exist on their own, to fight for themselves. Granted, it's not getting a job and buying a house and all that stuff, but when you send a kid to college, especially the ones who go away and live on their own, that is a transition. They're about to be out in the world 80% of the way, right? So you have these kids that are about to start their solo lives. And you have the situation when you play in a state championship or even a sectional championship where the kid will feel like everything is on the line. Their life is at stake. This is the most important thing that's ever happened to them. And then they will either win or they will lose. And no matter what happens, the kid will learn a lesson from it. The beauty of high school sports is that you can put a kid in a spot where he feels like the end of the world will happen if they lose, and then he has to manage the emotions if that happens. But nobody loses a job. Nobody loses a house. No one gets divorced. There are no real world consequences to that loss. It just feels like there are real world consequences. But that's great. That's what you want a kid to do. He's in high school, or she. They're supposed to learn. And when you lose, you learn how to manage that. How do you deal with the feeling? How do you refocus? How do you get back up? How do you go back to doing what you were doing that you just failed at, even if it is failing at the highest level? What do you do differently? Do you change anything? How do you manage the emotions? These are all skills, just like all the other things I talked about, that are vitally important in the world. And you have a chance to give this kid an opportunity to do it. If you go 2-18 in a season, you don't learn that same lesson. Yeah, you learn a different lesson about what happens if nothing's going right and how do you handle that. Sure, that's a lesson too. But this is a unique lesson that these kids, these Fillmore and Hamilton kids who played in the state championship, had the opportunity to win and lose a game and learn from it. But by tying and having co-champions, they learn nothing. It is not anything that changes them. There's no impact. Where in life do you tie? There's no two people who get a job. Either there's a winner or a loser, and you have to learn how to manage that. And the kids had an opportunity to learn that lesson, and it was taken from them because administrators, even if you want to defend it, believe that a penalty kick shootout is not a worthy way to end a championship. The problem is not about the penalty kicks. The problem is that the emphasis is on the championship and not the kids learning. Remember, even if you win, that's a lesson to be learned. How do you deal with success? Do you get complacent or do you continue to work hard? My daughter won a state championship playing high school volleyball. I got to tell you, she was a junior. And when her team came back the next year, I think there was a little bit of feeling good about ourselves. And they thought they would just roll through teams like they did the year before. And you know what? Their first match, they got down 10-0, and there was a quick lesson that things had changed. You can learn a lesson from winning just as easily as you learn from losing, but you don't learn anything from having a tie. So why are we protecting these kids, why are we preventing these kids from learning this lesson? What's the benefit? Because my assessment is that there is too much emphasis placed on the championship and not the lesson. High school sports should not be about championships. Now, look, there are some places, Ohio, Texas, whatever, where high school football teams are big business and are significantly valued in terms of the community. So then, yeah, if you lose a game, a coach might get fired. There are places where that happens. It doesn't happen in New York State. For the most part, high school coaches at every level are people who are generally volunteering their time. Sure, they get paid. They don't get paid anything worth the hours they put in. Most high school coaches, and when I say most, I mean 95+%, the administrator and the team is more thankful for the coach to be doing the work than the coach is thankful to have the job. So this is not about keeping jobs or promoting careers. This is about coaches and people who are donating their time to give the kids an opportunity to play. Yeah, they like the thrill. They want to win and all that stuff. But the goal of the sport should be to teach the kids something that they can learn and use going forward. And when you tie, you take that away. There is no reason why you can't have a penalty kick shootout to give these kids an opportunity to learn that lesson, to feel that pain, to feel that joy. Because a tie is nothing. And they do this in hockey too, by the way. And it's not just at the state championship level. They technically do this for sectionals too. It even feels kind of worse because for a sectional championship in soccer, if there is a tie at the end of overtime, they will often stop the game. They will have a ceremony where both teams get a trophy, both teams get patches, or sometimes they give one team the trophy or the other team the patches. They figure out some sort of ceremony. And then they have the penalty kick shootout to determine who's on the states. Now, at least in that situation, there still is a winner or a loser, and the kids understand. Even if the banners later on will say you were co-champion, none of the kids care about that. They're going to know who won and lost the game based on the penalty kicks, and at least you'll still have the lesson. But you don't get that at the state championship level. And emphasizing the championship or prioritizing the championship in New York State is the wrong way to go. Think about all the movies in the world where the kid or not a kid, the person grows up and all they ever do is talk about the championship they won in high school, how great they were, how they were all-state, all-star, whatever it is. Those people are mocked in the movies, right? No one wants to be that person. You don't want the highlight of your life to be the championship you won when you're 18. So if that's the way championships are generally treated, then why are we putting so much emphasis on it, on how it is won, on who wins, at the expense of what you can teach a kid, of the lesson they can potentially learn? There is too unique an opportunity here for a kid to take it away because of you don't think the method of deciding a championship is worthwhile. That's the thing. Like I said, there are a lot of kids out there who go 2-18 and have to deal with that lesson. But the kids who go to the state championship, there's so few of them. That is such a unique opportunity to be able to put yourself in that amount of pressure. Can you perform when everything is on the line, when all you have worked for, everything you've been doing and training for is right in front of you? Can you perform? And that should go all the way to the end of the game being decided. It shouldn't stop just because the methodology available for that particular sport is not satisfactory. No one stops basketball games when they get to overtime. No one stops football games when they get to overtime. And I understand that as opposed to hockey and soccer, the ability for players to rest is much more available in those sports, which makes it easier. I would never, ever sit here and tell you that I think either soccer or hockey should continue playing a championship but not go to penalties, because obviously the physical harm potentially available to kids is far too great. That supersedes winning a championship or learning a lesson, obviously. But the solution that you have here that is good enough for every other level of play in that sport, for the wildest and greatest professional and worldwide championships that soccer and hockey allow, because New York State does this for hockey too. When they all feel like this method to break a tie, going to penalty kicks, shots, whatever you want to call it, is fine, then I'm pretty sure it's okay for New York State. And at the very least, let the kid learn the lesson. Give them a chance to improve as a person. These championships and high school sports are not about making athletes better. Yeah, that's something that happens a lot of the time. But these sports exist to give kids another opportunity to learn something about themselves and how they operate in the world. And when you get to a state championship, there are so few kids that get that chance. Don't take that from them by quitting in the end. Let the kids go to penalties. Let them have a championship. Let them lose a championship. Because these are all things kids are going to have to be prepared for. In this world where emotional health and mental health is such a priority, I think we need to give kids a chance to learn to test the limits of that when they're younger, to let them understand how to handle that, and maybe even to figure out if there's a problem. I'd rather know that my child needs a different level or type of emotional support at 18 years old than when they're 28, when there might be real world consequences to not handling your emotional health. And then this is not about weakness. This is not about proving that someone can't handle it. Emotional and mental health in this day and age, I think, has been appropriately termed and approached as something to treat the same as if you have a cold or if you have a strained ankle. It's a thing that can happen to everyone that needs to be addressed in a particular way to heal it. You have an opportunity, a rare opportunity, to put a kid, at least from their point of view, in the type of pressure that will reveal things about them that I'm sure will be beneficial to them, that usually will be beneficial to them going forward in life. Don't take that away. Don't take that away. And every year this happens, and every year I'm bothered by it. It's just such a waste of time to bring these two teams together, to have them work all year long, to get to this game that matters more than any other one, and then to end it that way. You saw how the kids looked. There was no excitement. There was no emotion. It was just nothing. Because that's what the ties are. That's what co-champions are. It's nothing. And if you're going to give a kid an opportunity to learn, even if, look, when you can bring a kid to a practice, they have a chance to learn. So you want them every single time they're in a high school event, the goal is to learn something, to improve themselves. And in practice, you learn all kinds of different lessons about how to work hard, how to, again, build a team, how to listen to a coach, how to understand a role, how to appreciate what your role is and do it to the best of your ability, even if it isn't the role that you potentially dreamed about or had as a goal going in. These are all things you learn in a practice. In a championship game, you have an opportunity to see how you hold up, how you perform with, in at least in your mind, everything on the line. And I want my kid to have the opportunity to see what happens there, to learn about it. And when it's taken away, it just feels to me like something was lost. That an opportunity for a kid to learn a lesson is out the window. Every year I talk about this. I don't think New York State has any plans to change anything. I will again throw this out there on social media for New York State to see if there's any sort of wavering or thought. But every single year, the State High School Association blows it when they have two teams who come together to play for a championship and end the game without anybody getting anything out of it. And for the most part, look, there were 4 or 8 goals scored. It was an amazing game. I'm sure there were ups and downs and there were highs and there were things learned. So it wasn't nothing, but there should have been an appropriate ending. And the kids should have had that opportunity. All right, it's going to do it for me here on the Endgame. We are back again on Monday. We'll talk about Bills and Texans for sure. Remember, BKL Nightly will have our live postgame show right here in Rochester First, right after the game. Me, Caleb Carr, Rachel Liebert. And you can find that again streaming right here in Rochester First after the game for sure. Thanks for watching and listening to the Endgame today. My name is Thad Brown. I'll see you again on Monday. Have a great weekend. Catch you then.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.